this morning. I'm going to be teaching a long meditation at what time? 10 a.m. Hi, Sleepy Chopper. Are you sticking around? We are going on a walk with Kiki for our morning talk. And the plan today is not to sit in stillness and do a meditation, but for you to be able to ask questions about meditation, about courage, about vulnerability, anything that you would like to ask. And we'll have the option of you putting your video on and it turning into like a forum style discussion. Why? Because I really enjoyed doing that yesterday. So yesterday the question was, why do we do meditation? Like why? Why this? And my answer was, why does it work? Wonder Woman, yeah. Kiki's enjoying her little walk. We had a nice, intense meditation yesterday afternoon and this morning. And so at 10 a.m., I'll be teaching for the cushion crawl for Modern Om. And for that meditation, we're going to be talking about courage and vulnerability and being genuine with ourselves. And that is what meditation opens up for us. It opens up a whole new world of perspective of who we are, how we are, and the option to adjust. Because I'm not in the business of changing people. I'm not even in the business of changing myself. I am in the business of accepting myself, which means having to understand myself. Not just understand who I think I am, but understand where it all comes from and what my other options are. Who it is I want to be. How it is I want to be. How it is that beingness affects and alters the reality around me and the reality of others. So today, opening up the floor for questions that anyone might have about a meditation practice, how they can practice on their own at home without the codependent relationship that ends up happening with a teacher. So why do I call it a codependent relationship? It's very simple. Because I get a lot of students, private students, studio students that put a lot of responsibility on their teachers for their mental health. And it's funny because that's exactly what, as a teacher, as a meditation guide, that's exactly the opposite of what we're teaching. That's exactly the opposite of what the teachings tell us, is that we are personally responsible for our thoughts, personally responsible for our emotional state. So that responsibility doesn't mean controlling them. It means controlling how we respond to them. That's what the word responsibility is all about, is your ability to respond and not react to the conditioned thoughts. To respond and not react to the conditions of sensations that we call emotions. And so how is it, or why is it that that's so important? Well, because at least my little world and perspective of reality, whatever I put my attention on, my energy is going to flow into that thing. For example, the easiest example I can give for this is when you're falling in love, right? You're falling in love. This person is magical in your eyes. This person can almost do no wrong in your eyes. You're throwing so much energy into understanding this other person, into understanding and having compassion, even for all the shit that would normally drive you absolutely crazy, right? And then you're putting all that energy into pleasing that person, putting all that energy into making sure that person is happy. Unless you're a narcissist, then just making sure that that person keeps on giving you your narcissistic supply. But in your eyes, it's making sure that person's happy enough to give you that supply until you realize you don't have to anymore. And then what happens is eventually that emotional high of falling in love, it fades. It always does. It fades a little bit, right? If you're putting all of your energy and all your attention onto this one fallible human creature, it's going to fade. And then what you might end up realizing, what I end up realizing is, oh, all of that energy I was putting into them, all of those expectations I was putting into them, those were projections of who I thought they were because I was in love with them. And now I'm not in love with them. Now I'm tolerating them. Now I'm putting a lot of energy into explaining why I'm still putting energy into them. So whatever we put our attention on, our energy flows into. And we're responsible for that. It's not the other person's responsibility to make sure that we're happy. It's not the other person's responsibility to make sure that we don't get hurt. It's not the other person's responsibility to make sure that we see them in the best light as possible. Now, what if we flipped that? What if we turned that emotion, that attention, and instead of putting the emotion and attention into a relationship that is really meant to be a reflection of what you see in yourself, even though that person is not yourself, and you actually put a mirror in front of you, and you allowed yourself to be just as vulnerable with you, with that actual reflection, have just as much courage to keep your attention and your energy flowing into falling in love with the one relationship that you are going to have, the only one that is until the day you die, the only one that's really until death do you part. Because even your relationship with your creator, if you believe in that thing, that's eternal. That's not a death till you part, that's even beyond, right? So the only one that's a really till death do you part relationship is the relationship with, that's right, numero uno, your own self. And so you start putting your attention and energy into making sure that person's happy. You start projecting your image of who you want that person to be, in other words, yourself to be, onto that reflection. That's where that courage and vulnerability starts. Because then you start to see, maybe I'm not all those things in the way that I act, in the way that I am. And then we have the courage to say, is that something I am ready to or willing to change? Is that something I'm ready or willing to adjust? Or is that something that I am going to accept? And then have the courage and the vulnerability to own up to that and be genuine in it and see how the relationships around you change. Over the last year, I have had, first of all, one hell of a year. A year ago today, I had almost suddenly broken up with someone who I thought he was the one. I really did. Mainly because my spiritual advisor my medium, my psychic had told me that marriage was a possibility. She didn't say true love. She chose her words wisely. She told me marriage was a possibility. And then I realized possibility doesn't mean actuality, doesn't mean it's a life sentence. And so I broke up with him. And it was a very hard thing to do because I was still very much in love with him when I broke up with him. But I wasn't in love with myself. Not at all. I didn't like who I was when I was with him. I loved what I was doing. I loved that I was teaching. I loved that I was making it my life purpose to help people finally, not just bartending and making money, that my everyday goal and ambition was to better myself and do the work every single day. But I didn't love myself. I didn't think I deserved anything that I actually wanted for myself. I had what is called imposter syndrome. I'm a spiritual teacher. I teach yoga. I guide people into these higher states of consciousness, and yet, even though I was practicing every single day and getting these big downloads, I was as vulnerable as you could possibly imagine. I was crying in the bathroom. That's my favorite place to cry, almost every day. I couldn't even look at a picture of him. I avoided every single place, even my favorite spots, if I knew that he was going to be there. I used all of my energy to avoid facing myself and the reality that that person's never going to change. That the only person that really needed to change for my happiness was the one I looked at when I looked into the mirror. The reflection that we don't choose, right? And I had to make a choice. Am I going to stay rigid in my beliefs about who I am and try to prove it to everybody so other people see it too? Or I'm going to own up to what my actual conditioning is and then do the work every day to be better, to do better, so that eventually I can have better. Now, having better goes against everything I believe about my karma yoga, my union with God through karma, which means renouncing the fruits of your actions. And so when I say having better, I mean appreciating how beautiful my life really was, how beautiful my life really is. And I went through some serious, deep states of depression over the last year. And most of you, even those of you that are good friends of mine, even people that saw me every day, even people that saw me every week, even people that think that I was being very genuine and very open, they don't know that. They don't know that there were many mornings where I had to struggle to get out of bed because I felt like I was faking it. But the only thing that really would save me is when 7 p.m. rolled around and I had to get in front of a group of 20 people and talk about spirit, their spirit, and talk about how we as a community can better ourselves. And then afterwards I would feel better. Why? External validation. I had all these mirrors looking back at me in those classrooms, showing me who I wanted to be, but I wasn't truly convinced yet. I wasn't really living it yet. And then something shifted at Christmas time. Christmas time was tough. Christmas time was at the end of this depressive mode. And I'm talking like the kind of depressed that I was looking into going to see a psychiatrist, actually. I thought I might, maybe I do need to take antidepressants. And it was around Christmas time that things just started to shift a little bit. I'd opened up to one person who I wasn't that close to. I just dropped the word depression into a sentence that we were talking about something. Opened up to my grandmother a little bit as well. And this person had literally like one of those come to Jesus talks, like the what the fuck, you're amazing, you got all this potential, which I'm going to tell you right now, if you tell someone that's depressed that they're wasting their their potential, more than likely it's not going to pull them out of the depression. It's just going to make them feel worse about themselves. But I really believed him. I'm like, I know he's right. I know I have everything that it takes. Like intellectually, I knew it, but I didn't feel it. I didn't have that like deep conviction within my heart. I had the sankalpa. That's like the resolve, the resolution to love and embrace and accept myself exactly as I am because I'm perfect, whole, and complete. But as much as I could say it with conviction, I didn't feel the conviction. I didn't feel the conviction Until once again, I was a day away from needing to pay rent, and I was hundreds of dollars short, and my lifeline for finances was a student that I had to part ways with for reasons that I don't need to share here. And I had to go on absolute faith and grace. And I'll tell you what, this was one of those moments in my life that I was an atheist. Yeah, I go like back and forth. Out of my atheism always comes even newfound, more profound faith. But I had to have faith and grace. Not that something outside was going to come and rescue me, but I had to really look at myself, really take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and look at everything that I've been through to get myself out of this depression. And something hit me, something really profound. I was walking Kiki just like I am right now. And I realized, despite all of the abusive relationships, despite the being in and out of financial struggle since I left working nightclubs, since all of this stuff that has happened that has left some serious trauma scars, and I'm just like, who am I? I'm like this super entitled white girl. What's wrong with me that I'm feeling so bad, which just made me feel worse? Like, like really, really difficult things that I survived. And what got me through it was the knowledge and the intention and the grit that I'm here for a reason. And maybe that reason is just the fact that I want to be here. I want to be here. I want to be here in this dream. I don't necessarily want all the dramas and the suffering and the pain, and I don't want that for the rest of the world, but I do want to be here. I want to enjoy it, and the only way I'm going to enjoy it is if I know that my presence here is making it more pleasurable for other people, that I'm not here as a burden, that I'm not here as something that someone has to drag around. And that means that I'm going to have to do this on my own. I'm going to have to dig myself out of this mud on my own. Because if I'm reliant on other people, even students, and going to classes and teaching people to get myself out of it, I'm still codependent. I'm just as codependent as my student was to me. But I really want that because I know that I've got, that everything that happened in my life, that all the traumas that I've gone through, all of the kind of stuff that one day I'll write a book about and you'll be like, holy shit, she survived that. That the trauma that the world right now is going through, that what I found through all of it is all of that fear I experienced, all of that pain, all of that suffering, that was just part of this big grand illusion, that underneath all of it, if I'd only been listening, there was a deep, deep love for life. My love for life. No matter what version of it that I'm living. A deep, passionate love for life, and also a deep, passionate love, in love with me. With everything, with my own potential. I've been spending so many years falling in love with men for their potentials. And what was the lesson behind that? Oh, it's because I'm in love with my own potential. So why don't I just be the potential? Rather than projecting that kind of thing onto relationships of looking at a man going, why aren't you changing? Looking at a friend, why aren't you changing? Why aren't you living up to your potential? Jasmine, how about you live up to your potential? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's why what's being reflected back to you is because me, myself, I was not living up to it. I was reliant on all of these traumas as my crutch. As, oh, well, all of this bad stuff happened to me, so, I still need this because I'm afraid of getting hurt. I still need to hold on to that because I'm afraid of getting injured. I'm still need to hold on to this because I'm just not ready to walk on my own yet. Yeah. And so I dropped the crutch and I sucked it up. And Scott Tolchin, who was one of our meditation teacher trainers, him and I ended up having a one-on-one meditation session before, like right after I realized I was in love with myself. And he told me that he does this technique called havening to help people with post-traumatic stress. And when he described to me what post-traumatic stress was and what he does, I'm like, oh, that sounds a lot like what I've been through and what I experience and what it's like when I get triggered, and what I hoped that an ayahuasca ceremony would help me with, and what I hoped that mushroom ceremonies would help me with, and it's helped, but it just doesn't feel permanent. It feels like I'm constantly having to remind myself and do this work. And he's like, well, let's do this havening thing. Here, like you're my teacher, let me gift this to you. And I'll tell you what, when I said yes, I felt in that moment that I was dropping the crutch. I felt in that moment that I'm ready to face it. I'm ready to look in the mirror. I'm ready to look at all the places where I'm vulnerable. Look at all the places that if I even talk about it a little bit, if I talk about when I was raped more than once, if I talk about when I was beat repeatedly over a course of 5 years, I used to not be able to say these words out loud without getting choked up and crying and needing to hide from myself. Those are my places where I'm vulnerable. But I'm like, you know what? I'm ready to let go of this crutch, of this is an injury, and let it turn into a strong, strengthened, maybe a little scar tissue there, mark of my freedom. That I made it through that suffering. I'm alive. I'm thriving. That my abundance has nothing to do with an abundance of just all the magical, beautiful moments that I've lived in my life. That my abundance is, I have an abundance of life experience that has made me who I am, which is love. Loving myself, loving every single one of you, loving Kiki, loving all of these beautiful new relationships that are coming in and sometimes out of my life without expectation, without fear. Just being happy to be in that moment. And no matter what life throws at me, even though there's still going to be some triggers, I know how to handle them. And then in our first session, oh my God, we went deep. We went deep into some of the deepest ones, the ones that I had totally forgotten about, memories from 18 years ago that I remembered every single detail of that day. And when I remembered it and I talked about it and I let myself get triggered and I worked my way through it, I literally felt like the world was moving in slow motion because my brain wasn't needing to race around to explain why I needed to hold on to that memory as part of my personality anymore. Like, I was seeing everything the way that I thought and imagined the world would be in a dream. And I just felt relief. Never felt that way coming out of a psychologist appointment, I'll tell you what. Never felt that way coming out of a psychiatrist, and certainly never felt that way when taking any kind of antidepressants. So I allowed myself to be vulnerable. I allowed myself first to be genuine and admit, yeah, this stuff happened. It's real. It happens in loving relationships. It happens in non-loving relationships. I don't know what that means, right? And then allowed myself to be vulnerable and say, and yeah, this weakens me. This turns me into a puddle on the floor of my bathroom where I can't stand up for days and days at a time. These things make me think that it's not worth it because there's too many people out there that are suffering through this as well, and I don't know how to help them. Maybe I should just not be here anymore. And admit that those thoughts were happening, my vulnerability. And then be courageous enough to say, but that's not who I'm going to be anymore. And I'm going to keep on doing this work. I'm going to keep on being my potential. So there it is. That's what we did today instead of our meditation. A little preview of where we're going to go today. And it's a perfect time to get into your vulnerability. Because right now, you're working from home. Right now, you are only, supposed to be around the people that are closest and dearest to you. Or some of you might even be in a situation where you're with someone that it's going to require some courage and some vulnerability to get yourself out of that situation after the quarantine is over. But the first person and the only person that you really, really have to deal with right now and until the quarantine is over is you. And you have the space and you have the time. And we'll always have excuses not to do it, but you've got a lot less of them now. You always have the reasons not to do them, but you've got a lot less of them now. Now it's easier to see how all of those excuses, all of those reasons to not be genuine with yourself, to not be vulnerable with yourself and with those that you love, and to not have the courage to just go, I'm ready to lift up. I'm ready to pick myself up off the bathroom floor. Those are all going to be very visibly created by yourself. And that is okay. It's okay to still feel that way and to just take that one step to sit down in stillness and say, I might be ready. I am ready. I could be ready. Or even just to sit and go, let me see what this is about, because maybe I'll be ready one day. Maybe future chef is going to take care of that. Maybe future Marzo is going to take care of that. It doesn't have to be today, but at least today, join us at 10 a.m. with Modern Om. You can sign up, and then after my session today at 10 a.m., we've got multiple different teachers. We have an infinite amount of time. This is typically 11-day series, and we are doing this until quarantine is over, which could be 40 days. It could be 3 months. It could be just the next 4 days. We don't know. But you get a monthly membership, $39. It's worth it because then you can attend all of the evening meditations between me and Michael Stasko. And then once everything open, we've got a book club with Paul Tulasius that we're going over books of consciousness that help us realize that this is all a dream and all of our suffering isn't something that we actually have to experience, and we can rise above it. Access to higher states of consciousness with a community that has been my guiding light for the last 3 years. So I love you all very much. If you have any questions, now is the time to ask. You can press the little button here that has like the 2 little smiley faces if you want to call in and talk for a second. Otherwise, Kiki, did you like your long walk? Do you have anything to say? You know I have so much to say. She has nothing to say. All right, you all. Love you all. I will see you at 10 a.m. Have a wonderful day.